Amen. So in Luke 21, verses 25 and 26, and we've seen in these two verses that you can create a chiasm between heaven, earth, earth, heaven. We've seen in chiasms that even though the symbols are the same, it doesn't necessarily mean that the events are the same. So even though we might have a repeat and enlarge, it doesn't mean they're the same event. So when we come to verse 29, the question is it just a simple repeat that's being brought to view here, that the powers of the heaven are just the sun, moon and stars in 1798, or is this something else? Is this a future event? And I'm suggesting that it's a future event. And the question that we left ourselves with is, why are we making this assertion, or why am I making the assertion, that the powers in heaven are a future event, not 1798? So we know that Ellen White comments on this passage in response to a statement by Joseph Bates. So I think Joseph Bates makes his statement in 46, and she responds to this in 48. But separate and distinct from that, how can we show that this is a future event? Anyone? Luke 21, 25 to 26. My brother? If you're not sure? Okay. No.
I believe verse 25. Remember I told that, and there shall be signs. The word and immediately connects us with verse 24. But when you come to verse 25, there's no connection between verse 25 and 26. So it's going to be another event different from verse 25.
So if you have the word and, you're saying the word and definitely means that it's connected to the verse before? Is that what Sorry? So you're saying verse 25 is connected to verse 24?
But there's no connection between verse 25 and 26. It's a continuation from verse 24.
So what's the connection between 24 and 25 with the word and?
It's not really a connection, but a continuation is a thing.
Well, the verse would come after it, so we know it's continued.
So what I'm saying,
you just seem to be sort of backing out further and further from.
When it comes to verse 25, so the question was how you show 26 is a future event.
Yeah.
Not the one in 25. So if you read 25, it says, and there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and above the earth this sort of creation, in perpetuity, the sea and the waves glory. Then verse 26 is bringing another scenario. Men's hearts feeling them for fear and looking after those things which are coming on earth. So it's a future event different from what was described in verse 25.
And where do you see it future?
What?
How do you see it to be future? Because there's no word and. Or what's your reason to say that?
My reason is because there's no way you can connect 25 to 26.
So there's distress of the nations, and the distress is because every man's heart is failing them. It seems to me the natural reading would be it's the same event. It's not something that future, it's just a continued statement. In fact, if we didn't have verses, it would just be the next sentence.
Before I make my statement, will you allow me to read something that you can read for me?
What we're reading?
A spiritual book.
What book?
Christ Experience and Teachings.
So I just want to do it from the Bible. Just trying to see if we can do it from the Bible. The reason why I want us to be more focused upon doing that is because often we turn to a Spirit of Prophecy quote, and the Spirit of Prophecy quote often isn't that helpful. When we went to Desire of Ages 632, paragraph 1 and 2, we're still arguing over that one. And that was meant to be a proof text for verses 34, 33, 32, and then 29. So when we use Spirit of Prophecy to prove what we're saying, then we end up just arguing about how the Spirit of Prophecy is structured. So, I'm not. Obviously, we should use Spirit of Prophecy. It's there to be used. But if we can't find this, if we can find the information in the verses, that's where we should be. That's where we should be going as our primary source. And then we can go to Spirit of Prophecy and we can get it confirmed, or she can enrich our understanding. So, I've got a pretty good hunch that we can find it in the verses. If we all came to the conclusion that there's nothing there, then we could go to the Desire of Age, Experience of Christ.
Okay, in Luke 21 verse 25, it says that there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. But if you go to Matthew chapter 24 verse 29, these signs in the sun and the moon are described as the darkening, so which happened in the history of 1260. And verse 26 is going to tell us that for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So what is happening here is not the darkening, but it's shaking of the powers of heaven. Which the word shaking means to move or to topple or. So the suns and the moon will not move in their places in the history of 1260, and therefore we have that license to say that they are in the future.
Well, the stars moved.
According to this text, no, they are moving, falling from heaven.
Okay, it is only the stars which is moving its place, but the sun and the moon and the sun and the moon are not.
Okay, so your argument is that the sun and the moon go dark and only the stars are shaken. That's what your argument is, yeah?
Okay.
Say yes or no. If that's not your, if I've misunderstood your argument, say no. If I've understood it, say yes.
No.
So what was your argument then?
So in Matthew chapter 24, verse 29, it is saying that what is going to happen to the stars is that they are going to fall. But this is not the checking which is being described in verse 26.
So how do you know?
Because it is another event.
No, yeah, but I'm asking how you know.
Okay, because we are already told that is going to happen, then the other one is described to happen later, which is described as.
Where did it say later on?
Because say the powers of heaven shall be shaken, of which you cannot remove the stars from the powers of heaven, and that one did not happen in that history of 60.
So you tell me what it means to shake heaven.
Okay.
It means the sun's going to be shaken, or what does it mean?
To be moved out of the place.
So the orbit of the sun is going to move. The sun has got a place in the universe. It's got a fixed position, and you're going to move it. Do you think that's what it means, to be shaken? You don't think it is?
Then maybe I think about that.
Okay.
I think the reason as well we are saying the powers of heaven shall be shaken is in the future.
when we look at the structure of verse 26 of Luke chapter 1, we use the word looking after those things which are coming. So it seems like he's referring to the future.
There shall be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and upon the earth distress of nation with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's heart failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. So men's hearts are failing them in fear. Why? Because
of these things which are coming.
Because something's coming, it's not here yet. So the things that are coming on the earth, they're anticipating something that's coming and it isn't quite there yet. So you can see the future there. And then it says for, and it's the only place that it says for. In the other two Gospels it says and you can substitute for with the word because. So they're fearing for what's coming upon the earth because the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. And this is why Bates is going to say that the powers of the heaven is something on earth. Brother Rogers.
Okay, I think when you look at verse 26, we have the principle of cause and effect. So the cause is that we want to have something that is happening on the earth, and the powers of heaven are going to be shaken, and this is what is going to make men's heart to fail with fear. And when you look at that verse, it says men's heart failing them for fear, for looking after. Yesterday we said this word after is at. Looking at those things which are coming. The word coming tells you they are not here yet. They are in the future. Yeah.
So there's a cause and effect. What is the cause?
The cause is the things happening on earth and the shaking of the powers of heaven. The effect is that men's hearts are going to fail with fear.
So we can pick up this word or this phrase, which are coming, which means it's future. It's future to this last part here, where it says distress of nations. There's distress of nations, and then men's heart fail them because they're scared as they look at the things that are coming on the earth, because the powers in heaven are being shaken. Brother Robert.
Just a clarification, that phrase, those things which are coming, we're saying it's future, but that phrase can also be present continuous tense. It's not necessarily.
Okay, so if it's present continuous tense,
No, I'm just noting that.
if it was, what would that be saying?
I don't know.
Oh. I'm not an expert in Greek, so I don't know the answer to that.
I think also the reason as well you can see these things are coming in the future is maybe look at the historical improvements. Like, and there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. So you know that all takes place before 70 days. The signs in the sun and the moon are in
1780, we've got that, and 1833.
Yeah, I think 1833. So you know that the distress of the nation is is now the next event in future.
So,
Okay. So I think in what you're saying is mixing two things. Because you're saying the distress of nations is like you're addressing the present, is in that history. But you're saying when you come down, the things coming on the earth is not the distress of nations in the previous verse. It's a different thing. They're two different things. The distress of nations, I think, is this first earth here.
this is the distress of nations, 25b.
Yeah, but he's addressing it as if it's one of them. He's saying that once we have the darkening of the sun and the moon, and then we have the stars, then he's saying distress of nations is future. So he's addressing this distress of nations in verse 25 to be the earth in verse 26.
So that's not what I'm saying.
Oh, you mean Brother Kephas was saying that? I don't think he was. I don't think he was saying that.
I was not saying that.
I didn't. Tell us what you were saying.
I was saying that in Mark the historical events, this as they have been fulfilled. We are back that the signs in the sun was 1780. followed by the stars in 1833. So the next that follows, when you want to look at it in the sequence of order, that's correct. I'm not quite sure if that's correct, but if that's correct, if you look at it in the sequence of order, there is the distress of nation, and then the earth, men's believe that will hear the looking after those things which are coming on the earth. And that's not to say that the things that are coming on the earth are the distress of the nations.
Any other comments?
I think we should first understand the meaning of the word shaken.
Of
When it says that the powers of heaven shall be shaken, the meaning of this word shaken. And when you look at the Strong's Concordance, Strong's Light, it says that to shake down or to overthrow. So the powers of heaven, when they play shaken, overthrow. So I don't see how the events that happened in the falling of the stars and the darkening of the moon, they overthrown the powers of heaven.
So, if you had the sun and it's supposed to be shining, did its power to shine get overthrown? I think so. And if the moon is supposed to look silver and it then looks like blood, its power got overthrown. So I think you could argue. I agree. Shaking doesn't just mean to be moved out of its place. It has a more subtle definition. It means to whatever authority that you have, that authority gets taken away. Gets to be overthrown. Whatever the ability to do something is, that ability gets taken away from you. So the ability to shine gets taken away. Your ability to reflect gets taken away. So in that context, I think you could argue that it is the sun, moon and stars. But I'm still arguing that it's a future event.
Yeah, so the shaking, the real shaking that says that to shake down or to overthrow, that I think the word shaken has a twofold meaning, where I see that one means to overthrow, and it can also mean to take out of its place. But what happened did not take these powers of heaven out of their place. But when we read, we understand that during the plagues, that this will literally happen. They will be taken out of their place. But that didn't happen.
Okay. Brother Robert?
I just wanted a clarification. We are saying that the powers of heaven being shaken is future relative
to men's hearts failing them, I'm suggesting.
And where are we marking men's hearts?
I have no idea. So I'm marking it after the distress of nations. So this would happen first, second, and then that would be first and then second. Or third and fourth probably is the better way to do that.
Yeah, if the powers of heaven also mean the house of heaven, then that shaking, of course, refers to the falling of the star, because if the house of heaven means powers of heaven will be shaken, what are the powers of heaven? They represent moon and stars. And when we see something like that will happen, unless there will again happen in the future, everyone will say that okay, they will again happen in the future. But otherwise, look at the 1.6.
Sorry? Look at
1.6.
Mm-hmm.
When it says, men are falling from here and looking after those who are coming upon the earth. So the powers of heaven can be shaken. Yeah, powers of heaven were shaken.
I agree. I don't have any problem that the powers of heaven were shaken in 1798. I agree with that, but I don't think that's what that verse is saying. And if the verse isn't saying it in Luke, I'm suggesting it's not saying that in Matthew and Mark, that they're sequential events. And Matthew and Mark don't talk about the distress of nations.
So when I read verses 26, it says, men's heart failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. So the reason why these men's hearts are failing them is for two things, because of they have fear, and for those things which are coming on the earth. And then it puts a colon and says, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So when I see a colon, the first how I understand is that what comes after the colon is explaining what was before. So men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. I would assume that those things which are coming on the earth are as a result of the powers of heaven being shaken. So if you are asking, so you're saying that the future, we are marking future relative to men's hearts failing them.
Yes.
That is what you're saying.
So 4 comes after 3. This one here, the powers of heaven, is going to be after hearts men's failing them.
Okay, so for me, the way I'm seeing it is that the reason why these men's hearts are failing them is because of what is coming up upon the earth, and what is coming upon the earth is because of the shaking of heaven. So they are happening at the same time.
So I'm going to use his argument and say it's 1 second later.
Yeah.
So if you ever cause an effect, something has to come first.
Yeah. So men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. If I'm going to interpret the colon to mean that what is coming up, that what comes after the colon is an explanation of what is before.
Oh, okay, so you're saying I've got this the wrong way around. This comes first. Is that what you're suggesting?
If I interpret it, yeah, that's what it will look like.
And actually, that's what you said as well, cause and effect. This is the cause, and this is the effect. Is that right? That's what you said. The powers of heaven are shaking, and that's what's causing men's heart to fear.
No, I think mine was a bit different.
You tell us what you said, then I'll come back.
So men's hearts are failing them for fear, for looking after those things that are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So the I was taking the things that are happening on the earth are different from the shaking of the powers of heaven. So it's the things coming on the earth and the shaking of the powers of heaven that causes or produces fear in men's heart.
So what's the cause?
It's things that are happening on earth and the shaking of the powers of heaven.
Things that happen on the earth and things that happen in heaven is the cause, and it's producing fear. That's the effect. So we've got earth here, we don't have men, because here we had nations and we just put earth. So do you want to put something else? You want to put nations and men then?
Nations and men have.
Well, it says, and upon the earth, distress of nations. So we just had earth, and then we've got men's heart failing them because of what's happening on the earth. So you're saying there's no relationship between earth and heaven here?
No relationship.
I'm just trying to see what that structure looks like when you put the words in.
When you say no relationship, are you like insinuating that whatever that is happening on the earth is a result of the shaking of the powers of heaven? So is that the relationship?
I'm asking. You're saying that it is or it isn't. You're saying the two.
The prophetic charism, I think they're two independent things.
So there's two independent things.
Yeah, there's something happening on earth and something happens with the powers of heaven, and this is what produces fear in men's heart.
Okay, so we're not defining the relationship of these ones or these ones. We're just saying there's heaven and earth, and then earth and heaven, and there's no relationship between when they happen.
So like if you come to the first fact, I think there is the sun, the moon and the stars which will make as the powers of heaven. Then you have the distress of nations. We apply to that history, we will apply to 1840. So you see that those are two different things. And I don't know how the darkening of the sun and the moon turning to blood and the falling of the stars affects the distress of nations.
Okay, so that's fine. So is the things that are coming on the earth happening before The heavens being shaken.
Yeah, that's how I will understand it.
Okay, so
Oh, did you have something to say? Sorry?
You can just go ahead.
so I was saying, I think I'm seeing a pattern here in verses 26. Men's hearts are failing, and I think that is the effect. And the effect and the cause will be because of what is happening on earth and in heaven. So that's the first one.
When you say first, that's all you want to say, or more?
No, I'm continuing.
Okay.
So the first relationship I'm seeing here is a cause and effect, and the cause and effect here is men's heart failing them, the effect, the cause is what is happening on earth and in heaven. Then when you come to this cause, what is happening on earth and in heaven, I'm also seeing a cause and effect within it. That what is happening on earth is as a result of what is happening in heaven. So
Why?
because I'm saying, you look at how that sentence is written, and for looking after those things which are coming on earth, and then there's a colon. So I'm just trying to ask in my mind what is the effect of that colon, because when that colon comes, then it is written, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So in my mind, I'm trying to imagine probably the shaking of the heavens is what is causing things to happen on earth, and that is what is shaking this earth. That is how I'm saying.
I have the same argument, but I want to point out the word for, and for the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. The word for there means assigning a reason using an argument or explanation. So the word for is giving an explanation for why we have, for why these things are coming upon the earth. It is because the powers of the heaven are being shaken.
So normally we'd use the word because, which means an explanation. Men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, because the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So if I understand what you're saying is, you're saying there's two cause and effects. One of them is there's men, and this is the effect, and the cause is earth and heaven. And then you're saying there's another one which is earth and heaven.
Yeah, and the whole argument is because of that column. I'm just asking myself what is the meaning of that column that is there. And if I could just...
And Sister Joy's argument is from the word because.
Yeah, so she's saying that word, the colon and the word for, is like because. So...
No, she didn't say anything about the colon.
You didn't mention the colon, yeah, but she talked about the word for.
Yeah.
And then, if I would just act out of the rules a little bit, if we are going to say that the powers of heaven being shaken are the plagues, I'm also imagining that what is coming upon the earth and making men's hearts to fear is also the plagues. And the plagues, what is happening on earth is a result of the heavens being shaken.
Has anybody else got a comment?
Yeah, I want to bring to our attention that in verse 25, when Luke was giving us the sign, he started by the powers of heaven, the sun, moon, and the stars. And then in verse 26, when he's now telling us the effect on the man, then again he began with the things on earth. And then he ended up with the things of heaven, which is the power of heaven. So I want us to notice that.
And that's the argument that we're using. I can't remember who spoke about this chiasm, is to show that in Luke the powers of heaven are separate. They've been separated by these two phrases here: the nations and the men's hearts. These have been put in between the heaven and the sun, moon, and stars. And then it says the word for, which I'm saying is the word because. It's saying there's some relationship between the earth and the heaven here, a cause and effect relationship. So Luke seems to distance the powers of heaven from the from the sun, moon and stars. Anybody else had their hand up?
Okay, now I want to argue on the basis of the cause and effect rule, but I want to give it a little bit a different approach. If you can do me a favor, write cause the effect.
So I've got cause and effect.
Yes. Then on the cause, what causes the men's hearts, as in what causes the men's hearts to fail is fear. What causes, so let us have fear on the effect. We have fear. Then, what causes this fear is the things coming on the earth. So things coming on the cause. Things coming on the earth. Then we have for the powers of heaven shall, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So this one is also another cause, or it is expounding on the cause. The powers of heaven shaken is a cause. And so I would suggest that how I find this. Men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things. Okay, the things that are coming upon the earth and the things that, the powers of heaven shaking are the things that cause the fear. So currently we have fear on earth, which is caused by the things that are yet future. And what are these things that are future? Are the things that are coming on the earth and the shaking of the powers of heaven. Okay, if that makes sense.
So, what's the effect of the heavens? The fear of men's hearts.
Heaven's shaking will bring fear upon earth. As in, these two, the events coming on the earth, which I think my brother Robert was suggesting was like the plagues, and the shaking of the powers of heaven are things that will come in the future that will cause fear, that is causing fear currently on the earth.
So you can't say that it produces fear on the earth, it produces fear in men's hearts.
Yeah.
Because the earth is something, there's something going to happen on the planet that's going to make men's hearts have fear, and there's something going to happen in heaven that's going to produce fear as well.
Yeah, yes.
So you're seeing it different to Brother Robert. So explain why it says because.
I have another question.
I'll just let him try and answer this. Why does it say because? Men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. We'll put a full stop there.
Sorry?
Put a period, a full stop after the earth. It's got a colon there. I'm going to put a full stop.
Which means it's expounding about what will make these men's.
But then it says, because the powers of heaven shall be shaken. What does it mean, because?
Because, it is expounding on the fear that is created in the heart of man.
Okay, so I'll stop there. Brother Robert is disagreeing. He says the heavens are going to produce fear in men. The cause is heaven, the effect is men, not the effect on the earth.
Yeah, I still see it in his perspective, but I would still insist on a cause and effect between heaven and earth in verse 26. But yes, what is happening on the earth is causing fear, and what is happening in the heavens is also causing fear. But I don't think whether it's in any way disagreeing with what I'm also saying.
Okay. My brother?
Yes. I want to ask a question. What is the relationship between the powers of heaven being shaken and the distress of nation causing fear?
Verse 25. The sun, moon, and stars, and the distress of nations.
I believe distress of nation and all the horror of the waves of the sea and the one causing fear. These are the things coming on earth. So, what is how the shaking the power of nature, the distress of nature, and those kind of vexes?
Okay, so this is what Brother Cephas was asking earlier about how we read verse 25, the sun, moon, and stars, then the distress of nations. So let's ask ourselves the question. Most of us believe that verse 25, the distress of nations, is the distress of Europe, 1840. Is that right? Is that your understanding? Okay, so how do we know that? Where do we get that from? Brother William, where do we get the distress of nations is the European nations are upset about Egypt?
I don't know where others get it from, but where I get it from is...
What did you say, you don't know?
Where others get it from.
Okay, yeah, just show us where you get it from. Yeah, I don't care about them.
A commentary from Josiah Litt. That is where I get it from, at least. I'm not sure that is correct.
So Josiah Litch is going to go to Luke 21 and he's going to make the application of the distress of nation, and he says that's what's happening in 1838. The nations of Europe are distressed because of radicalized Egypt.
Yeah. I'm not sure how they are.
Okay. Brother Cephas?
Answer the question.
Yeah.
Can I ask the question just like my time? So, I think there's a quote to first Hawaii study 21.
There's a quote from Ellen White that's going to say that.
Yeah. I think it's in other writings 41.
Okay, so I will go to early writings 41 in a moment, because 41 isn't going to tell you that it's 1840.
Yeah, but it's not going to tell you it's 1840, but she's going to identify that the distance of the nation is the angle of the nations of Europe. So you can therefore make an application for what she is saying. It's not. Okay, 48.
Who is maybe not please?
Yeah.
It's 1848.
Yeah. You want to read about 1848.
Yeah, but you can make also an application.
We can do what we want because we're all prophets. I'm just wondering, you as a prophet, how you made that 1840.
Okay, let me think that through as I make my other problem. I can't still think that.
Is it germane to this?
No, not really.
Hold it for a minute then. Hold it for a minute. Just want to see, how did we get 1840 here? Okay, you don't have an answer.
I don't have the source.
Sorry?
I don't have an answer.
Okay.
Revelation 9.
Revelation 9, verse.
Verses 11.
Okay, and how's that going to show us that the distress of nations is 1840?
I think the question he asked me, how do we get 1840?
Oh, no, I'm happy to have to get 1840. I get 1840 from 1449, July 27th. I'm okay with that. What I'm asking is, Luke 25, here, it says the distress of nations. What is that? What is the historical fulfillment of that verse?
The historical fulfillment of that verse is
the nations of Europe were dispersed because of the radical Islam.
So how do you know that? That's what I'm asking.
We're reading from Josiah Lich.
Okay, so you get it from Lich the same way. No, my brother?
Actually, me from the dialect, that is where I get that away from.
Okay, I thought you were going to say you got it from William. My brother?
Okay. I think historically about how it happened, this way people can have understanding about it. Because when you see Sister White writing, it's writing in 1948, but it's not writing exactly at the very time this assassination is happening in Europe. But he's writing about what had happened in the future, in the past, what happened in the past, and he's giving the testimony about how these people were preaching badly. And
just tell me where you get it from.
Okay, I've never read of that of Josiah Lich. Yeah. I've never read it.
You've never read it. So where did you get it from?
Okay, I just got it from these writings.
So you get it from early writings?
Yeah.
So you get it from early writings 41. My brother?
I'll just take it from Josiah Lich.
You mean you just get it from William, or you read it from Josiah Lich?
Josiah Lich, I know. Great controversy.
Sorry?
I mean, it is then great controversy how it is applied.
It says in a great controversy. She's going to quote Luke 21:25. My brother?
You lost me.
I've lost you. Okay, so in verse 25, it says about the distress of nations. Here. Agree with that? Sun, moon and stars on the earth, distress of nations. Yep. You've got to say yes or no, I don't know. We're in Luke 21:25. It says the sun, moon and stars. You agree with that? Tell me what the sun, moon and stars are. Give me the dates. Or the event. I can't hear.
Let's go to the next question.
Yeah, but I'm asking you, not the next person.
You lost me with the question.
That's fine. So I'm trying to bring you back into the class. What book are you in? Luke 21. Go to verse 25. And you read the first part of the verse for me.
And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and the stars.
So we'll stop there. Tell me when that was fulfilled. Let him. You don't know what year? I know you know what year because you've already mentioned it in the classes already. When does the sun go dark? What year? Sorry?
Just leave me alone.
Leave you alone? Yeah, but I'm only asking you a simple question. I'm wondering why you won't answer.
The sun, moon, and the stars. These were signs that preceded the dark ages.
Just tell me the dates.
I did, okay. So around 1788. And then the falling of stars, the one we read in Great was in 1833.
Okay, so the sun and the moon is in great controversy. It tells us it's in 1780. Do you know that as a fact, or you don't know that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 1780 and we've got 1833. You agree with that?
Yeah.
And we just said they're the harbingers or the tokens that bring you to 1798. That's how Ellen White talks about it. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, you get those things happening. Then the next part of the verse says what?
And upon the earth, distress of nations, with the perplexities, the sea and the waves roaring.
What's your understanding about that part of the verse? The distress of nations. What do you understand that to be talking about?
Nations can also be like the shaking of the powers that rule upon the earth, like wars.
Okay, so is it some general thing, or is it a specific thing?
It's something general. You can't just put it in a specific date, because we see distress of nations throughout the history.
So has that already happened?
This one can be specific because it's a sign that Christ is giving before his second appearing.
So it can be specific?
Yeah, it can be specific because, yeah, he's saying, if you go to verse 27, it says, and then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with power and great glory. It shows that this distress of nation will be had before Christ, before we see the Son of Man coming. We must see the distress of nation which we have never witnessed before the history.
Okay, so what's your understanding about the fulfillment of what's going to cause that distress?
What's going to cause the distress of this nation is, for in verse 26 says that men are failing them for fear and for looking at those things which are coming on the earth. We say that therefore is because the powers of heaven shall be shaken. But then in verse 27, well, that's where it says, and then, because of the coming of the Son of Man, there will be the shaking of the heavens, which will cause distress of nations.
We're all happy that it's going to happen between these two events.
Yeah.
So we are, I'm not asking you that. What I am asking is, what causes the distress of nations?
What causes the distress of nation is the shaking of the powers of heaven and the coming and the nearness of the coming of the Son of Man.
And you know the nearness of the coming of the Son of Man because of the first part of the verse, the sun, moon and stars. So you know you're near.
Yeah.
So because he's near, is that what causes the distress?
Yeah, because it is near, we see now so many things taking place in different nations.
Like what?
Rumors of wars.
Okay, so you're saying that the distress of the nation is caused by rumors of wars. Is that right? Not only, but that's one of the things. I'm repeating what you just said. But if I said it wrong, tell me. That one of the things that causes distress of nation is rumors of wars. Just want to make sure that's what you said. I'm only trying to help you. I'm not trying to make you look bad or do anything wrong. You don't have to be worried. When people say something, when any of you say something, I want to repeat it so that I make sure you and me know that I heard you correctly. That's the only reason I'm asking. So all I've asked you is what this causes distress of nations, and you said it's wars, rumors of wars. I think that's what you said, so I'm just confirming, is that what you believe? Yeah. So in this history here, from verse 5 to verse 31, where did you ever hear about wars and rumors of wars? Which verse is that? I've gone back to Matthew, because 5, 20, 21, 28, these are Matthew verses. We could go into the Luke verses, but in the Matthew verses, where do you see wars and rumours of wars? Because you've picked up that phrase, and we all know that you picked up that phrase from these chapters.
Verse 6 and 7.
Okay, so if we were to go to Luke, because if you're in Luke 21, it'd be verse 9. So it'd be Luke 21, 9. And 10 and 11. But if you're just going for the wars, it's Matthew, it's verse 6, 7 and 9. So you agree with that? 6, 7 and 9. So what history is verse 6? 1, 2 or 3?
Yesterday I said something, I don't know if you still remember what I said. I said that the book of Matthew is structured into, we have 3 specific history. The destruction of Jerusalem, the 1260, and then the time of the end, when Christ is coming.
I've got the same, 1, 2, 3.
But then the signs and then rumors of wars and other things which Christ is talking are the things which are going to happen throughout those histories. You can't say that the rumors of wars are specifically for the destruction of Jerusalem. It would be wrong.
Tell me where verse 6 goes.
In which book?
Matthew. Tell me where verse 9 goes if you're in Luke. I don't mind which one you're in. It says the same thing. And you shall hear of wars and rumours of wars, see ye but not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Where'd you put verse 6? In 1, 2 or 3?
Before 3.
Yeah, but I want to know 1, 2 or 3.
I can't say 2 because 2 would be specific and say it's between 538 and 1798.
So it's here?
No.
Then where?
Being so specific, yet this can be changed. I can't just say it's 2.
Let me ask you another question then. Where do you put verse 20? Oh no, wait there. You're in Matthew. No, I'll go back to Matthew. Sorry, we're jumping books. So in Matthew, where do you put verse 15? 1, 2 or 3?
Still the same thing. I wouldn't say that specifically it's 2 or 3.
Sorry? You can put it anywhere you want to.
Yeah. Because I would put my history in 3. Or
where did Jesus put it?
Jesus.
Yeah.
The apostles themselves put it in their history.
No, not the apostles. Where did Jesus put it? I don't care what the apostles. I'm asking. This is Jesus' prophecy. I'm not asking how the apostles interpret or what they think. I'm asking what did Jesus say.
When you read only that verse, it doesn't show where you puts it.
So when I put 5 to 20, you don't agree with that. You don't agree that verses 5 to 20 is in history number 1, which is the disciples. You say no. Yeah, you don't agree with that.
Yeah.
So you don't agree that you even got 3 histories.
I know there are 3 histories.
So the tribulation, can you put the tribulation here?
No.
Why? Why can't you put the tribulation there? Why are you so firm about the tribulation, but you're not firm about the abomination of desolation that stands in the holy place? How can you be firm on some bits and not other bits? Can you put verse 30 here? In number 1, can you put verse 30 here?
No.
So there's some verses you're sure about, but there are other verses you're saying you can put them anywhere you want. So you don't have to answer that question, because the answer is yes. There's some verses you put anywhere. So when we go to verse 6, wars, rumours of wars, what you're going to end up doing, I suspect. So let me ask you a question. When it says the wars and rumours of wars, what wars are these it's talking about? Can you list the wars? Name them. I guess you're going to say no, because it could be wars here, wars here, wars here. And if it's here, since 1798, I was going to ask you, which wars are this is it talking about? And what would you say? Civil War, the Prussian War, the German War, Korean War. I mean, there's been hundreds of wars. How would you know which war is it talking about? Or would you take the Adventist position that says there's just lots of wars nowadays? Because they're going to do a graph that says since 1798, look at all these wars that have happened. So we must be here at the end of the world. Because that's what Adventists would do, isn't it? Where do you put verse 6? Here. So that's teaching us what? That here, there are no wars. Because the wars that we need to focus on are these wars. Because there were plenty of wars in this history, and there were plenty of wars in this history, but Christ isn't talking about any of them, is he? He's only told us certain wars to focus our attention upon. And the only place you're going to see them is here. Or not? No? Yeah? I mean, we don't take the sun, moon and stars and try and backtrack it into this history, do we? We don't take the tribulation and move it into this history. So why do we take individual verses and try and bring them into those histories when they're not placed there? So what wars is it talking about here? Is it talking about some war between France and America? Or between Russia and America? America doesn't even exist. Not even sure Russia really exists. So what you need to do is you need to go back into the history of the first century and find what? You need to try and find some wars, that the ones that Jesus is speaking about, between AD 31 and AD 66. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? And then when you find those wars, then what do? You make an application and bring that into our history. Because if you start saying there's any kind of war that you want to, there's no way of understanding prophecy, is there? There's no way of understanding what's going on. Okay, so we're digressed. So my question is, the distress of nations. Distress of nations.
Okay, according to me, what I can say is that after the sun and moon and stars, that is, we have seen is 1780, 1833, that is where we can see the sun, moon and stars. Then after that one, we will see the distress, the progressive, we can see the progressive build-up of distress of nation of the things that are happening on earth that is causing the distress of nation. And then at the end, we shall see the powers of heaven being shaken, the sign.
So you don't give a fixed waymark for this distress of nations. It's just the nations have been distressed for 220 years.
Okay, what I can say, those distress of nations are those which are playing role in the Bible prophecy. There are nations which you can see there is wars, many wars, but the one which we locate in Bible is the one which.
So you're coming back to wars. To me, if you go to anywhere in Matthew, the only place you ever see wars is here. But you're bringing wars into this history. Because you're assuming what causes distress is war.
Okay, according to the way I see it is that there are specific events where we can locate specific event with specific structure, like number 1, 2, or 3. Like for example, the stars, the sun and moon, we cannot locate in one.
Stop for a minute. I'm asking this a simple question. Just tell me where 25 part B is.
25 part B.
Distress of nations. Just tell me what you understand that event to be. If you're saying it's not an event, it's just something that happens over hundreds of years, there's distress all the way through, that's fine.
There shall be signs in the sun.
Not that, no. I'm just asking about the distress of nations.
Distress of nation. I can say it is from. These are events which are progressive, the distress.
So it's not a particular event.
Yes.
Okay, Brother Rogers.
Okay. So if we agree on the chiasm that we have on the board about sun, moon and stars, plus the earth, when we have earth and powers of heaven being shaken, so we did identify that the earth in the first part, which is the distress of nations you're asking in verse 25, is different from the earth in the second part.
Okay. Carry on.
Then, another point, how we prove that those two earths, whatever they are, they're different, is when we came to the cause and effect of verse 26. Robert tried to suggest one. We had two. I don't know if we reached a conclusion which one is correct. But we say that men's hearts are failing them for fear because of what is going to happen on earth and what is going to happen in the powers of heaven. So those two events cause men's heart to fail for fear. So then if I come and begin to line up the events, so in verse 25, we have the sun and the moon, that is 1780. Then, I believe we'll have 1798. Then we'll have the stars in 1833. Then after the stars, we are going to have the distress of nations. Then once we have the distress of nations, then we'll have the second earth, whatever is happening on the second earth, which causes fear. Then we'll have the shaking of the powers of heaven. Then in 27 we'll have the coming in the clouds, which I'll put in 1863, at least in the context of what we're given. So then these other events must come in between 1780 and 1863. So, but we know that the distress of the nations is different from the earth. So I'm inclined, based on that sequential order of how I put them, to say the distress of nations is 1840.
Okay, so what's your proof for it to be 1840?
Okay, also based on what I've read.
Which is just Lich.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lich seems to be the person who's gone to this passage and said this is what it means, and we've just accepted that. My sister?
I tend to think that stress of nation is something that is happening over a long period of time. It's not at our feet to know.
Okay. That's it.
I think it's a big foot. And how I put it, I don't know whether it's correct. That word distress, and it can mean trouble. And I go to the Bible and I look at who troubles the nations. It's Islam. And I look for a time when Islam was troubling the nations, which is the king.
Babylon never troubles anyone?
He does, but I normally pick Islam because it works for me.
Okay. So you just do it through...
It can't be Babylon because in the history after 1718, after 1833, it can't be Babylon. So I look at that history at the end of the world, who is it that troubles the nation? So I normally go quickly and show that it's Islam that troubles the nation, and it works for me. I don't know if it's correct.
Okay. My brother?
Because I was asking a question, because when you look at the word distress means, anxiety in the mind because of so many calamities that are happening. And then we only limit ourselves to what the science really says is that it only happens in the human body. And then because when I read the 25, what caused men have to fail is because of the distress of the because of the obeying their heart. The complexities, the roaring of the seas, the distress of nature, this is what brings fear into the heart of man. So if we say distress of nature only refer to alcoholism in I don't quite agree with that conclusion, though.
You don't?
I don't agree with that. What Lich said.
You don't agree with what Lich said?
Because I can apply it if from 1993 after second category that there is a distress of nature in this country.
So it's just like a general distress. So where did you get the definition for distress, trouble? So I've got, it's 4928. It says restraint, figuratively anxiety, or a holding together, being put into a straight place or into a distressful situation, or to have anguish. Comes from 4912, which basically means to hold together, to press together. So the distress of nations is what? Sister Emma, what's distress of nations?
You see it as conflict, not necessarily warfare. So it's agitation between them.
Agitation between the nations.
Yeah.
My brother? The anguish of the nations.
According to me, I can say this.
According to?
According to me, I can say this Islam that is causing the distress of nations.
Sorry, according to?
According to me,
okay.
I can say it is Islam that is causing the distress of nations.
Based upon?
And my argument can be, because my brother was saying them they were quoting Josiah Lich. But me, I'm going to quote Ellen White, then again. For example, in early writings, I'm going to tell you that the distress of nation is the anger of the nation.
Okay, so before we go to, is that 41?
Yes.
Yeah, so I know we want to go to 41, and Brother William's going to find Josiah Lich's quote for us. So, the distress of nations, if your argument is that, I just want to go from the Bible. We can go from the Bible, distress of nations, not from Ellen White or Lich.
My argument is, I was saying that Ellen White is saying that the distress of the nation is the anger of the nation. So to me, I
I picked that phrase, the distance of nations is equal to the angling of the nations. Then I'll go to the Bible and see which is this thing that angles the nations. Then if I go, for example, in the book of Revelation chapter 11, under the second trumpet, the third one is going to say that there is an angling of the nations. So you can see the angling of the nation, that it brings angling of the nation is Islam. And if I go back now to 1838, 1840, you can see also the angling of the nation called by Islam.
So we've got Luke 21:25, distress. Revelation 11, which I can't hear that.
Verse 18.
Revelation 11:18, which is anger, and you're saying distress equals anger, and you're saying anger is under which, the third woe you said? Is under the third woe, and you're saying the third woe is Islam. So you're saying that anger is under the third woe, it's produced.
I'm not saying that the anger of Luke 21 is caused by the third woe. What I'm
No, I've got it here. Revelation 11 is anger, is under the third woe, therefore it's produced by Islam.
What I'm saying is the list of nations is equal to the anger.
I've got that.
So I've taken the phrase, the angering of the nation, in the book of Revelation. But the angering of the nation, in the book of Luke 21, I'm not saying that it's caused by the third woe.
I'm not making you say that. I agree you didn't say that. So all you're saying is, you're going to take this concept produced by Islam, and you're going to bring it back into here, you're just going to say the distress is produced by Islam. So you're going to say it's produced by Islam, and then you're going to go into that history, and you're going to say when. And you're going to say that was 1840. That's your logic. And this bit here, you're saying is early writings 41. That's going to give you this. Is that right? Yeah, you're saying early writings 41 says distress equals anger, and then you can tie this all together. Okay? Just making sure that I understood you correctly. So, I want to just go back to the word distress. What does distress mean? We just read it from... It means to hold together, which comes from this concept of narrowing, or contracting part of a way. Metaphorically, it means to be in a straight place or in distress or anguish. So that's why they say holding together or narrowing, because if you're going through like a funnel, this would be the strait, like the Straits of Hormuz, or the Bosphorus Straits. So if we were all here spread out, by the time we get to here, because it's a straight place, we're all coming together. So we're all holding together or being bound together. So, can we go to a history that's after 1798 that is dealing with nations who are all going to hold together or come together? And we know that history, that in 1840 the nations of Europe all come together, which is this distress. We get it from the definition, and there's 4 of them, and 4 of them can represent a number of things, but it can also, at a simple state, 4 can represent all, if I can put it that way. We wouldn't normally express it that way. We'd normally say 4 is worldwide, but worldwide means everything. So I've just changed 4 equals all. So if 4 nations are doing it, all the nations are doing it, and they're all pressing together against one common enemy. So we know there's a historical event that comes in a history that's post 1798 that we can define from the word distress itself. Doesn't just mean they're upset or scared or worried. It means they're pressing together against something. So we can just take it from the word itself, and we still got to read early writings 41, but there's a logic here.
And you can show that it is Islam that brings the nations together.
And we can show it's Islam that brings all the nations together. So let's do that. So this, we've got the word, this is distress. And distress means to come together. And we know Islam does that work. And how do we know Islam does that work? So this is Genesis 16:12. So Genesis 16:12 says every man's hand, doesn't say it's coming together, but every man's hand is going to be against this one person. So if every man's hand is against this person, then Genesis 16 says all hands are together, and all hands together means distress. So you can bring in that, and Genesis 16:12 is a story of Islam. Anyone else want to make a comment? So I think we've got pretty reasonable arguments to show that the distress of nations, whilst it's a continuation, it's not just a singular event, but we can mark it as a specific singular event. We can do that. And the event that we'd mark is this trouble that's happening in Europe, the history of 1838 to 40. So we mark August 11th, 1840 as a waymark, because we like doing waymarks, but it's this history of the nations being distressed by Islam, the third row in that history. So do you want to just read what Josiah Litch says, if you found it?
I've not been satisfied.
Oh, okay. So we'll do it in the next class. So in the next class, we're going to read early writings. We're going to maybe read it in your own time. We need to prove, if we're going to use this logic, that distress is anger. So we need to do that. Then we're going to see what Josiah Litch says. But even without that logic, and even without Josiah Litch, I think we can show, just from a word study, that based upon one premise, that the verses run sequentially. If you walk away from that and start trying to mix and match the verses, you get into problems, I think. When you start bringing wars into this history or into this history, the wars are a specific event in this history, and if we approach it differently, I think we can get into problems. We should try and have a consistent rule that whatever in 1 is not in 2, is not in 3, unless we have a specific information that tells us otherwise. Even when Ellen White says you take verse 11 and bring it here, even that I don't think is a strong argument, because what she's doing is she's guiding us of how to actually apply the chapter. She's not saying verse 11 happens at the end of the world. She says verse 11 happened in that, and then it also applies into a different history. So I think, I don't know about all of you, I'd like for all of us to be on the same page, but I think we can show that this is 1840, 38 to 40, the things that are going on in Europe. It talks about nations. There aren't many nations around the world in that history anyway. There are only a few nations. From the word study you can see distress, means coming together. We know there are 4 nations who come together, and when they come together to deal with radicalized Islam, we can go back to Genesis and we can see that's a fulfillment when every man's hand comes against Islam. So I don't know if everybody's happy with using that kind of argument. You don't just have to use Litch's statement and we say, that's the fact, because he's an uninspired person. I'm not saying I'm not arguing against that, because Ellen White confirms his prophecy and his methodology to be true, and therefore why would his application of verse 25 also not be true? I would see that it was true, but you can do it independent of him.
Because we do great controversy.
Great controversy?
And which is commended concerning science. Immediately after forming, the next thing she brings to view is another remarkable statement is Figures 11:13. So you can take and assume that whatever she's doing is sequential all the way. Immediately after the stars fall, the next thing that we should be seeing is Figures 11:13. And that is what she does as well.
Which page? GC 334. So paragraph 1 says, in the New York Journal 334 paragraph 1, November 14, 1833, appeared a long article regarding the wonderful phenomena of the stars falling. Paragraph 2, thus was displayed the last of those signs of his coming, concerning which Jesus bade his disciples, when you shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Matthew 24:33. So it says, this is the last of those signs which Jesus speaks about. After these signs John beheld as the great next event impending, the heavens departing as a scroll, while the earth quaked, mountains and islands removed out of their places, and the wicked in terror sought to flee from the presence of the Son of Man. Revelation 6, verses 12 to 17. Many who witnessed the falling of the stars looked upon it as the herald of the coming judgment, an awful type of a sure forerunner, a merciful sign of that great and dreadful day. Thus the attention of the people was directed to the fulfillment of prophecy, and many were led to give heed to the warning of the second advent. In the year 1840, another remarkable fulfillment of prophecy excited widespread interest. 2 years before, Josiah Litch, one of the leading ministers preaching the second advent, published his exposition on Revelation 9. So she's marking 1833, then she says that was the last sign, and then she says 1840. So if you did Luke 21:25, it follows the same sequence. So that's your logic. Then I think that's a reasonable, good logic. If you read paragraph 2, we're not going to go over paragraph 2 again, but she speaks about after these signs John beheld as the next great event, next impending, the heavens departing as a scroll, while the earth quaked, mountains and islands removed out of their places, and the wicked in terror. That to me sounds like this, the earth and the heaven here. I don't know if that's what people are reading that to be. That's what that sounds like to me. Okay, so we've got that. So we're going to read Josiah Litch, and we're going to read Early Writings 41 to do that.
The very elect.
And we need to do the very elect as well. And C. So we've got some things. Sometimes it takes us a bit longer for everybody to get on the same page. So I'm not sure how many of you are still disagreeing that the distress of nations, whilst it covers a lot of history, is a specific event that we can mark. Because if it's not a specific waymark, it really doesn't do much for us. Because what we really want to do is have waymarks. The reason we do that is because the Seven Thunders was a delineation of events that transpire under Millerite history. And if we're not looking for events, what are we doing? It becomes quite problematic to make any kind of application. So we should be focusing on events. And I think we have enough information, maybe not for you, but I feel we've got enough information. If we can prove this, it's a really strong argument. Josiah Litch himself, Ellen White rubber stamps his prophecy. That's an argument. We can see that in GC 334 that she lists the events in the same order that Luke lists them, and we can do a word study on distress, which is this pressing together against a common enemy. And then we can, if we do that, we can bring in Genesis 16 to as another witness to show that this would be 1840. And you just need to go to the history books to show that that's what the distress of nations is. We mark 1840, it's not a singular event, but it's a period of time, normally 38 to 40. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we give you praise and thanks for your goodness. We ask, Lord, that you would guide, direct us in our studies. Help us to be faithful and true to you. We want to ask and pray in the precious holy name of Jesus. Amen.